Sac passe tout le monde. My name is Dr. Lou Saint Joseph. It's a pleasure to have with me uh, an amazing friend, an amazing scholar on Haitian Protestantism, uh, Dr. Lenny. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are you? I have to say, I almost don't want to do this if you're not wearing a bow tie. You know,
Yeah, what's the bow tie,
Where's
Lenny?
the bow
I
tie?
don't. You know what? For our second interview, I'll wear a bow tie for you.
Thank you.
How's that?
Thank you. I require it for the second
All
one.
right. So again, this is the Center for Faith, Reason, and Dialogue. Um, we've been having great conversations with some of the most brilliant minds in the field of religion, not just, the religious experience of the Haitian people,
Hmm.
religion in general. So Lenny and I will be talking about an interesting topic, unlocking the power of Haitian Pentecostalism, Lame Séles, the Heavenly Army in English, and spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
Now, before we begin, Lenny, why don't you introduce yourself, your work,
Mhm.
um, to our amazing audience?
Yeah, I can do that. I think that I probably should start
Mhm.
a little bit deeper so that folks know that my first engagement with Haiti and with Haitians and with Haitian culture and Haitian religion was not as a scholar, but as sort of a theologian that was leaving, the fold or something like that. I studied theology and was primarily kind of a theological thinker, and I lived in Port-au-Paix, Haiti, from 2004 until 2011. At that time, teaching, Greek and Hebrew and theology at a small preacher training college. So then my engagement with um, Haitian religion, like from a scholarly angle, came sort of in the next phase of my life. I earned a PhD in religious studies from UNC Chapel Hill, and I've been fortunate to land at the College of Charleston, which is where I'm teaching right now. And at Charleston, I teach global Christianity. So
Mhm.
all of the courses on the history of Christianity. What I like to do,
Mhm.
so Lucien, is I like to slide in Haitian Vodou
Mhm.
as a kind of spin on Christianity, just to sort of
Ah.
make people really think.
Mhm.
And so we do these Black Atlantic Christianities as an entire unit where we sort of think about, and
Mhm.
I leave it as an open question because many of my students, like many of your listeners, are Christians, right? Who would find offense at that suggestion. So I leave it an open question. Is Cuban Santeria, is Haitian Voodoo, are these Christianities, or is this a
Mm.
bridge too far? Right. So we play with that and kind of try to investigate that. And that is exactly what led me to Pentecostalism,
Okay.
um, because these are Haitian Christians
Mhm.
who other Haitian Christians accuse of being too closely aligned or too much like Vodouism.
Yes. But you know what, Lenny, thanks for the intro. But I do
Yeah.
have a question for you. When you were at UNC Chapel Hill,
Mhm.
did you take any classes with the great Bart Ehrman?
I didn't actually, no.
Okay,
I
okay.
didn't, but I should back up. When I did a master's at Duke
Mhm.
almost a decade earlier, and I
Mhm.
did take a class with Bart Ehrman when I
Ah.
so, but not when I was at UNC.
Mhm.
I was in a different track. I was doing
Okay.
religion Americas was
Yeah.
sort of my
Yeah.
subfield.
He's more into Christianity, New
Yes,
Testament, the New
yes.
Testament scholar, textual
Really
critic.
great guy, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I heard he has a great personality.
He really does.
It just hits hard
He
on,
does.
on Orthodox Christianity. He's a brilliant mind. A student, a former student of Bruce Metzger. Metzger, one of the most renowned textual critics in the world, right?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was a fun environment for me to be around because I was no longer doing New Testament or Ancient Mediterranean, which is what the subfield is at UNC. I wasn't doing that, but because I had done a lot of that work earlier, I was always interested, you know. I actually used the office of another faculty member, Zlatko Pleše, who has written some with Bart Ehrman on Gnosticism and
yes.
apocryphal Gospels. And so we had lots of fun conversations, but it was nice that I could have those conversations and then write about something different.
It's interesting. You mentioned your background in theology, you as a theologian. I think for me, you are a theologian / religious scholar. Would you take that, or do you prefer the latter term, religious scholar? I know it's more broad. You engage, I guess, multiple ideas, multiple disciplines, and
no, I think that's an interesting way to pose the question. Definitely where I'm at right now in terms of like my job, you know, I'm a religious studies scholar.
Yeah, okay.
And that's the stuff that I'm teaching. I'm in a religious studies department. But what I think you're pointing out is that the work that I am doing currently has never left behind sort of the questions, and also just some of the knowledge that being sort of deeply immersed in the world of Christian theology gave me. And I guess one way to say that is that when I'm studying or writing about Lame Séles, these Pentecostals, I'm not actually just looking at what they're doing with their bodies, though that's interesting. And I'm not just looking at healing practices, although that's interesting. And I'm not just looking at what they say. I'm actually often sort of posing these questions against theological questions that I know exist for them, right? And I don't know that because they're explicit. I know that because those are questions that I once had about, you know, theology, or those are theological distinctions. What separates, you know, the oneness Pentecostal tradition from another Pentecostal tradition? Those are things that I would not be asking about if I hadn't spent so much time doing a different kind of research. Yeah.
So, but how did you get? I know you at the beginning. You gave us just a sneak preview, but we want more detail. How did you get? Well, how did you first? What brought you to Haiti? How did you, what brought you to Haiti? Let's begin with this question.
That's a beautiful question with, I think, a not unique answer. Okay. I was born and raised in Kentucky. Kentucky is one of the whitest, like Eastern Kentucky is potentially one of the whitest places on planet Earth. I can't verify that, but it certainly I think there was one Black student at my high school, for instance, right?
Okay.
So, but another thing that's true about Kentucky is that it is sort of deeply evangelical in the you know, oldest sense of the word, even though now it's sort of modernizing, becoming mega churches. Lots of restoration movement, Stone Campbell, like that kind of, and that's the kind of tradition that I was raised in the church. But where does Haiti come in? Well, Haiti comes in because I had a youth minister that was so influential, like for a lot of people, I think, who grew up in the church. A youth minister that, I mean, he was fantastic, and he actually has passed away. He died much too young in an accident. But his name was Mark Angel, And he was married to a woman named Lori Angel. Well, that was not her maiden name, Lori Alexander. And her parents operated a mission in Port-au-Paix. And so when I was, I believe, 15, I went on a 2-week trip, right? A mission trip, a sort of
what they call short-term mission trip.
Short-term missions.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
I went, and I don't remember anything, so Lucian, because I threw up the whole time. I was so sick, just sick the whole time. And then when I was in college at a small little Bible college called Kentucky Christian College.
Okay, I've heard of it.
Okay, yeah, it's little.
Yeah.
My friends and I, we sort of on our own went back just for, as college students to that same place. And then we went our separate ways. And this was about the time that I was sort of questioning if I wanted to do the thing that I was pursuing, the biblical studies, ministry, all of those things. So I went to Duke to do a master's in theology, as sort of a step into the academic world. And my friends went off and did other things. One of them went to work at that mission in Haiti. And when I finished at Duke, I had taken some classes in liberation theology, but even more so, I had done some reading in liberation theology that was really where my head was at the time. And my sort of highest concerns morally and ethically were with poverty, global poverty.
Yes.
And so I didn't have any idea what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to do a PhD. I did not want to do that. So I started asking around, and my friend who was there, my good friend from college who was in Haiti, said, "Hey, there's this little Bible college in Haiti that's getting started up. It's coming up from Port-au-Prince, and they need people to help get it off the ground." And I thought, there it is, I get to go. So I went and did that for 7 years, but a lot changed in the experience of actually rooting myself. And one of the things that changed was that my eyes stopped seeing poverty and started seeing life. It was different, it was just so different. So on my own while working there, I could feel myself sort of shifting and moving in my thinking. I started reading the classics like Life in a Haitian Valley, Briskovitz, and I was trying to learn as much as I could. I read Liza McAllister's Rah-Rah, things that were really opening me up to a whole world that was in front of me that I didn't understand. I started reading about Haitian Revolution, the significance of the Haitian Revolution. Started reading Laurent Dubois. I was reading everything that I could read on my own. And then the reason that we ultimately decided to leave was I was not a good fit for working at that mission ultimately, because I kind of had
different perspective.
Wanted to do other things. I had a different perspective.
Okay. Yeah. Lenny, talking about Kentucky, I don't know if you know that about me. I went to Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky.
In Louisville, okay.
Yeah, for my Master of Divinity.
I don't think I knew.
Yes, Southern is one of the most conservative seminaries in the United States.
I believe that is
conservative.
True.
And I also went to the University of Louisville, Kentucky, for a master's degree in French language and literature. So,
man, you've done it all, haven't you? That's why you wear the bow tie.
But Kentucky, my experience in Louisville, Kentucky was transformative, and especially where I was at the seminary and the university. I met many students from Francophone Africa and the French program. yeah, so, but again, the emphasis on even the the evangelical ethos there
Mm,
is very strong,
yeah,
very.
it is. Yeah. And I think, I mean, there was a time, I'd say
Mhm.
maybe a decade ago, or maybe even when I was starting the PhD, when I wasn't sure, what to do with that part of my life, because I don't really
Mhm.
see myself or understand myself as an evangelical
Mhm.
Christian currently. Um,
Mhm.
but I actually, one of the interesting things is how um, influential my sort of deep insider knowledge of
Mhm.
evangelical Christianity has become on the research that I do now. Like,
Mm.
you
Yeah.
know, there are questions that I ask, and sometimes these Pentecostals, my informants in Haiti, are like, yeah, let's talk about that, because they have those same questions, or like the questions that always troubled me are troubling them. And so it
Mm.
provides a sort of entry point, and a point of connection that,
Yeah.
even though I wouldn't call myself an evangelical by any stretch
Mhm.
today,
Right.
I still live in that world when I'm doing research with these
Oh
folks.
yeah.
Every time I enter a church, you know what I mean? Like, you know how it is when you're in Haiti.
Mhm.
If you walk in as a guest, like, your pastor, whatever your first name is, and they're gonna
Yes.
ask you to pray, they're gonna ask you to preach, they're gonna ask you to do all sorts of things.
Yeah.
It's like the worst nightmare for an anthropologist, you
I
know?
know. I love
No,
it. I
no, I don't
love
want to preach. Please.
it. Oh my gosh. So you and I have a book, and other contributors have a book coming out. It's called Evangelicals,
Mm,
Catholics, and Vaudouism in Haiti, the challenges to live together. And you contributed one of the most brilliant chapters in the book. So we're going to talk about your chapter. And recently you published a well-researched, anthropologically focused slash religious focused chapter. Uh, the title, the title is Where Have All the Ugan Gone? Charismatic Christianity and Moral Representations of Vodou in Haiti.
mm,
So I would like us to turn our attention to these two important works of yours in this conversation. So now, in your chapter, you use the phrase converti consensus. And of
mm.
course, converti is a Creole word. But what do you mean to describe, and why do you describe it that way?
Yeah.
Converti consensus.
Yeah, that's the hardest part about writing the research that I did, and just to frame it, the research that I'm really drawing on in all of this writing happened between 2013 and 2018,
Mhm.
because it's been really hard to get back, and continue some of this since
Mhm.
that time. But one of the hardest things for me to do was to find a way to describe what I knew to be true in
Okay.
Port-de-Paix. Now, this is not necessarily true in other places, but in Port-de-Paix,
Mhm.
no one is denominationally exclusive,
Mm.
except for maybe a pastor, right? And he has a vested interest in his exclusive sort of dedication to being a Baptist, or being a this or that. But for the most part, um, folks are all over the place, in the course of a week. And by folks here, I mean people who would consider themselves converti.
Yes.
Because really, we can trace other kinds of Protestantism in Haiti, and they exist, right? But the kind you're going to see is an evangelical kind, like the kind that you're most of the time going to encounter, especially in Port-au-Paix, is an evangelical Christianity. But I didn't just want to name it evangelicals, right? Because that's a little bit loosey-goosey. That's hard to define even in English.
Too broad.
It's too
Very
broad.
vague.
And
yeah.
It's too broad, and there are theological disputes contained within that. So I wanted to name it after the way people describe themselves. And what I noticed is that I could talk to, a Baptist pastor who was a friend of mine. I could talk to a pastor at a place that just called itself a Christian church. Or I could talk to Pentecostals, like the big Pentecostal church downtown, the Église de Dieu. And all of these people would self-identify as moun qui converti, right? Regardless of denomination. And so when I call them the converti consensus, what I'm trying to describe is that people visit all of these churches. No one says, hey, I'm a Pentecostal, I can't go to the Baptist church because they're not charismatic. Or I'm Baptist, I'm not going to go to the Pentecostal church. Those lines that exist in the United States are just not there. They're just not there. Haitians are relatively unburdened by denominational disputes. You can find a few, and usually it's because they were trained by someone who had a particular bone to pick,
Yes.
But there's a consensus. The reason I wanted to point to the consensus, though, is because Lame Séles is not in it. They're right on the edge, always tipping out of the consensus, And so my research has always been motivated by that question. Why are they out? What's the tipping point, right? Which thing is it? The herbs? Is it the style of dance? Is it the music? What's the thing that puts them on the outside of the otherwise big tent of converti?
But Lenny, why don't you answer that question? Answer it today.
Oh, I've been trying to answer it, man. I've been trying. I think there are several ways to answer it.
Right.
But if it can be answered in a single word. And for this, I would point to Karen Richmond.
Karen Richmond.
Karen Richmond is the person who, for me, has made most clear in her writing that Vodou is a mediating force, not always like mediating in the sense of, reconciling, but it is the middle term in this equation of Haitian religion. And that is to say, if something looks enough like Vodou, you're going to find yourself on the outside of the converti consensus. And they'll do the same thing with Catholicism. If you listen to the reasons that converti Haitians, don't like Catholics, they're not pointing to doctrine most of the time. They're not pointing to the Pope. They're not talking about, like any sort of post-Enlightenment ideals about hierarchy. They're going to say, well, that's because all Catholics are Vodouism. Right? So association with Vodou is what puts a person on the outside. So then you can also sort of unpack that, right? That's what I'm trying to do in my research, is to say which things look like Vodou to other Haitians. Where is the thing? Because they've all been to these services. They say they have, but they've all been. Everybody at some point. That's an exaggeration, obviously, not everybody, but most people that I talk to can say, yeah, one time when I was sick and I was 6 years old, my mom took me to this prophetess, or whatever. they're standing in the role of like mambo or ungan.
Yeah.
They're playing that role socially, but they're doing it, inside of a church, right? Where the Holy Spirit is the power. It's not the law. It's not set. It's nothing else. It's Holy Spirit. But that doesn't rescue them from criticism. People go, but then they don't want their pastor to know they went. That's
oh my gosh.
always when I'm talking to people at Lame Séles services. Afterwards, they'll come up beside me to make sure that I don't tell their pastor that I saw them there. So that I mean, as an anthropologist, that tells you something, right? Like when people say, "Hey, don't tell anybody I was here," like that's something to investigate.
Lenny, when I was growing up in Haiti, my family, we were members of a Baptist church, very conservative Baptist church. So on Sunday,
where was this?
In Carpathian.
Oh, in Carpathian.
Carpathian. Yeah, it's in Carpathian, and we would attend church every Sunday, Wednesday night Bible study. But on Friday, like Friday night, that's when we would go to the Lame Séles.
Jean,
you would dare to tell somebody at the Baptist church you attended Jean that night, that previous Friday. You will be kicked out. Another thing that we knew also, at least in my experience, Lame Séles has power. Lame Séles has power in the sense that spiritual power, they perform healing, where, things that you did not find in a typical traditional Baptist church. You have some, if you have a child who is sick, you will not take that child to a Baptist pastor,
right,
or to a deacon. Go to a Lame Séles where they perform healing. Right. That was my experience,
Yeah, I mean, they certainly claim to have power, right? And the power, I mean, I'm not saying that they don't, but they claim to have it. Other people claim that they have it. And sometimes the power itself is what is suspect. That's really interesting too, right? The title of the chapter that I wrote for your wonderful edited volume is taken from a phrase, right, of a Baptist pastor who said, no, look, we do the same things, right? We dance, we sing, people are healed, but we don't, this is how it's followed, but we don't do it the way they do it. We don't have to touch people. There's no touching. We don't use that kind of music and dancing. So then he followed it with all kinds of, these are the things we don't do, right? So there's clearly anxiety about, like, if it works, right? If people are being healed, how are they being healed? If I take my kid, to the mambo, I'm worried as a Christian, right? As a person that's converted, I'm worried if I take my kid to the mambo that they're going to leave worse than how I took them because of spiritual affliction. That's what parents would tell me. If I go to the mambo, she might make his body better, but then months later, there's going to be more affliction because we have engaged with powers that they deem to be demonic. So if I go to Lame Séles, at least I know that they're using Saint-Esprit.
Yes.
But there are those critics who say they're not, right? They're not using Saint-Esprit.
They're not using Saint-Esprit.
They're not.
And that's a big claim. Not only it's a big claim, it's a controversial one.
Yeah. I mean, it's also, maybe fortunately, it's a claim that no anthropologist, no social science can possibly respond to.
No.
But it surely is interesting to watch them try to measure
Yeah.
Do you, for instance, do
Mhm.
you measure the identity of spiritual power based on its power?
Mm.
Because the Christian
Mhm.
says the Holy Spirit is the most powerful force,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Yes.
So if it works, you have the possibility to say, look, it worked.
Mhm.
Therefore, this is clearly the Holy Spirit. And that's what
Right.
the prophetess in the chapter that I wrote for you, that's exactly what she tells me. Because I asked her, I'm like, what are you doing? You covered the person up with a blanket, you prayed for them. And she's like, yeah. And the demonic spirits are gone.
Mhm.
So it worked. It's the Holy Spirit. But I also interviewed a man who left Lame Séles. He
Mhm.
used to be a deacon,
Mhm.
and he left because he said he found himself one day beating somebody, to a bloody pulp. In his words, he said,
Mhm.
his blood was all over my shirt, and his
Mm.
blood was all over his shirt. He said, and I looked at myself and I thought, this isn't the Holy Spirit. And so he
Wow.
left. And so he left.
Wow. Whew. Now, you mentioned, you used a phrase that's very important to me.
Mm.
You quoted Karen Richmond.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the phrase is Vodou as a mediating force, right?
Yeah, and that's not exactly the language she uses.
Yeah,
Just to
you,
be
you
fair.
paraphrased. You paraphrased. But in your chapter, you also made a claim that Vodou has played a central role in the growth of Pentecostalism. Can you elaborate on that? Tell us how.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's sometimes when we're writing, you probably experience this too.
Mm-hmm.
We sort of come to realizations as you're digging through stuff. You're
Mm-hmm.
digging through um, your own data, thinking about it, but then also other people's writing. And I make this claim. It's a claim that I'm a little bit nervous about, so it
Mm-hmm.
needs some clarification.
Mm-hmm.
But what I mean to say when I say it is that I think there is no denying that the popularity of
Mm-hmm.
Pentecostal, or we could even be a little bit more broad and say charismatic Christianity
Okay. Mm-hmm.
in Haiti, um, it is partly because there is a sort of taste for spirit-filled religion.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I'm being really cautious here is because we know, like old, tired tropes about
Mm-hmm.
Black religion. And I'm
Yes.
not trying to reproduce that.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, I think what I'm trying to say is that most Haitians who um, take Vodou seriously, and most Haitians take Vodou seriously,
Oh yeah.
whether they're participating
Oh
or they're
yes.
fighting against it, it is taken seriously. And
Mm-hmm.
the fullness of that sort of spirit world
Mm-hmm.
means that, like, when Pentecostalism comes on the scene, here are tools, right? Here are converted tools, and it includes dancing, it includes the possibility of singing and drumming, and it includes miraculous signs. That's something that, like, Theodore Holly and
Yeah.
is not gonna bring to the
Mm-hmm.
scene. But
Mm-hmm.
but Pentecostalism brings that onto the scene. And I think, I mean, what part of the way that I make that claim is that I suspect, I can't prove this, but I suspect that when you see the Catholic Church start making, like, really strong attacks, not just against Vodou, but also the incursions of Protestants in Haiti, right? When the Catholic Church, Kate Ramsey has done so much of this good work.
Mhm.
in both the spirits and the law. She's
Yes.
summed up all of these sort of archival sources. When you see the Catholic Church saying, you know what, we've got two problems that if you're a good Catholic, you got to watch out for, the Bokor, and you also
Mhm.
need to watch out for Protestants. Those are two wicked things.
Mhm.
I don't think they're talking about Theodore Hawley and his crew. You know,
Mhm.
I think they're talking about the growth of Pentecostalism, because that doesn't happen until like the 1930s, 40s. And that's right when I think one would begin to see more Pentecostalism in Haiti. And so its nearness to Vodou, and also like its oppositionalism directly against Vodou. I can't think of another religious tradition in Haiti that has been willing to, or says that it does, enter the ring face to face, with Vodou, like head on, like we're going front lines against this thing.
And some of the practices are similar,
Right?
but that creates what you have phrased a double suspicion, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Is is that coming from both sides?
No, that's a suspicion. It means, for me, here's what it means. It means that, excuse me, there's a mosquito trying to fly around my head there. It means that Lame Séles, not all Pentecostals, right? But this particular kind, because, I hope your listeners do detect that there is Pentecostalism, and then there's Lame Séles, which is a particular kind of Pentecostalism, right? So this isn't true of all Pentecostals, but um, no matter what they do, they're going to be suspect.
Mm.
Yes, what I mean to say is, like, if they're successful in healing, then they're going to be suspect, because what kind of powers are they using, right? If they back away from that, then they're going to be suspicious because of the ways that their practices appear similar. So it's like they there's no way for them to sort of prove themselves. It's an impossible task. And I call it a double suspicion because Nicholas von Arx, writing many years ago, said something that I find really compelling, which is that there's a double legitimation that happens with Lame Séles, because he said they exist as a legitimate religious assembly, and they exist as a healing center. The problem that I have with what he said is that Lame Séles never is talked about as legitimate. It's always suspect. It's growing, it's popular, but it's not popular in a legitimate way. It's popular under the radar, right? Everybody's going, but nobody was there.
What would you say? I know you mentioned some of the practices in Lame Séles, the Heavenly Army, but what are some of the distinctions between, I'm going to use this concept very loosely, traditional Pentecostalism
Mm-hmm.
and the Lame Séles we find in Haiti?
Yeah, I think so. I will be honest with you. Um, I'm going to become a little bit less confident in everything I'm saying for this reason. The Lame Séles that I know really, really well is geographically limited. And I don't know if this is true everywhere. But one of the things that's sort of remarkable about Lame Séles in the Northwest Department in Haiti. So this is like Jean Rabel, Port-de-Paix, Saint-Louis du Nord, those areas. Is that 100% of the prophets and prophetesses that operate these churches are what I would consider a oneness Pentecostal. Yeah. Are you hearing me okay? Because I lost
Yeah, yeah,
your audio.
yeah,
Oh, you're okay.
yes, yeah.
Right. So they are baptizing in Jesus' name only, right? There's no Trinitarian formulation, none of that. So that's one thing that doesn't separate them from Pentecostalism fully, but it is a distinctive about these groups. The thing that really sets them apart are these weekly or bi-weekly jeûnes. I mean, otherwise you might not know. If you go on a Sunday to Lame Séles church, and they're not going to say, you know, this welcome to the heavenly army. You know, that's not how that works. People around them use that term. Sometimes they'll use the term, you know, the army, like, hey, come back tomorrow. Remember Tuesday, the army will be working. You know, so you just pick it up in little bits here and there. But the places I visited, one of them had Tuesday and Thursday. They had a jeûne on both days every week. Sunday looks like a regular Pentecostal church. Tuesday and Thursday is not a regular Pentecostal church. There are always people sleeping sort of full time, you know, in the floor as if it was a hospital. People who come for months at a time, you know, are staying in this place. And in that sense, they're really interesting because there's a little sort of community operating inside these little churches. Somebody who, you know, I would have said had tuberculosis, but they told me, you know, had Nam or Baka or Zombie or some other thing. He was there for 4 months, you know, and he slept on the floor. But during the day, as he was beginning to feel better, he'd get up and he would help the sweeping, and he would go, you know, and buy some food for everybody. So really interesting kind of communalism that happens sort of by accident with all the afflicted who are gathering around, you know, the prophets and prophetesses. Another couple of things that I should mention is that they use herbal remedies, you know, remède fait. They're using things that most folks in Haiti associate with Vodou, though I'm not sure that they ought to, right? Because many of these are things that are just traditional,
Yeah, traditional.
healing practices.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it extends well beyond remède fait and into the domain of, like, you know, parlor tricks. There's this burning ritual that one of the prophetesses loved to do if a kid had a bellyache and she thought she knew what was causing it. She would soak a cotton ball in rubbing alcohol, put it in their belly button, and then light it on fire, you know, and it would flame up. But of course, this was combined with huile saint, you know, holy oil, rubbing on the belly, praying, and doing other things. And then that person also would stay and be around for, you know, the jeûne, maybe for weeks. And when that bellyache resolves, healed.
Now, this is great. This is great. We can talk about that business all night. But I do want us to transition
Yeah.
to your newly published article, Where Have All the Gone? Charismatic Christianity and Moral Representation of Vodou in Haiti. I want you to talk about the connection between the name Lame Séles, the heavenly army, and spiritual warfare, right? Spiritual warfare. Is there a connection between the two? You know?
I think that's such a good question. I don't have a definitive answer.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons I don't have a definitive answer is that no one in Haiti can tell me exactly the origin
Mm-hmm.
of, let me say that's, you know, and I have addressed this a couple of times. Originally in my dissertation writing, you know, was like, where did this thing come from? I don't know. No one will tell me. There are lots of possibilities, but the truth is, this is just a very sort of African inspired, Congo inspired in some ways, riff on Pentecostalism. Now, where they get the name Heavenly Army, you know, they speak of themselves as an army. They sometimes speak of their robes as uniforms. They use some of this militaristic language. And they engage in very much what they would consider to be spiritual warfare. But I think it's really important, you know, and we encountered this recently at the Kosamba. You know, people hear warfare and they get really worried that like these Pentecostals are out attacking people. And that's really not the sense that anyone should get from this. This is spiritual warfare, and spiritual warfare is not unique to Haitian Pentecostals. Spiritual warfare is sort of alive and well in the discourse of American evangelicalism, of African evangelicalism. You know, it's all over. It's a sort of New Testament concept in a certain way.
And Paul.
Right.
Ephesians.
Exactly. The armor of God. And so I suspect that the name has just sort of, I don't know who first used it, who first deployed it. I get different answers. Somebody told me the Salvation Army. Haiti.
Interesting.
And here's why that is almost not true. Well, it's compelling because when the Salvation Army came to the U.S. from England, it was a sort of Wesleyan, you know, Methodist.
Yes.
But it really kind of became a oneness Pentecostal movement, and certainly was so in Haiti when the first Salvation Army outpost arrived. So that's a possibility. I just don't. It doesn't hit me quite right. I think that it's more organic and unique to Haiti than that. But what I'm really interested in is the way that, first of all, spiritual warfare as a discourse, as a Christian discourse, traveled with missionaries. That's definitely true, especially, you know, post, and Liza McAllister has written all of this up, you know, in a couple of different places, but see Peter Wagner, you know, at Fuller Theological Seminary, that sort of strategic level spiritual warfare where Christian theologians of the evangelical variety were imagining actual territories. And this is a little troubling, right? I mean, I'm sure that this is troubling for anyone who gives it much thought. The band of demonic domination on the globe is basically the equator, right? Like that's when you're like, there's a whiteness to this kind of discourse, you know, that says all those places where brown and black people live are dominated by demons. So there's that, but I also want to highlight in my research, I want to highlight that the idea of spiritual warfare, not necessarily the evangelical language of it, but the idea of it predates any kind of missionary coming to Haiti, because Vodou is a kind of spiritual warfare, right? Haitians are very accustomed to the idea of, like, you know what I mean? Somebody has sent this spirit, right? And another one's coming back. There's a retribution. There's a warfare kind of built into the spiritual cosmos of Haitian religion already. So it makes a ton of sense to me that Pentecostalism, drawing on the language of spiritual warfare, would be ready to deploy.
So hold on, Lenny. You said something that's extremely important here. So you mentioned the idea of spiritual warfare is embedded in Vodou itself. Yeah,
but not spiritual warfare in the Christian sense.
No, right? I know.
The idea.
The idea.
That's spiritual combat takes
Yeah.
place, right?
Yes, yes,
That the world is not just what you see.
yes.
That's
Right.
what is there before Pentecostals show up, before any missionary comes with any particular discourse about the thing.
Mhm.
What exists is that the spirit world is full to overflowing
Mhm.
in the, cosmological perspective of Haitian people,
Mhm.
and that spirits are dangerous but powerful, and some are good and some are bad, right? So like warfare
Yes.
is built
Mhm.
into that.
Right, right.
There are ways to counteract, what somebody might be throwing at you. So when you have in the 80s and 90s Christian missionaries from the US in particular that really start flooding into Haiti in that era,
Mhm. Mhm.
I think it just overlays on top of that existing cosmological perspective a, a Christian spiritual warfare discourse. You know what I mean? Things like prayer warrior, intercessor,
Mhm.
the language that was developed by folks
Mhm.
in English, right,
Mhm.
with US missionaries, is really easily integrated into the sort of growing Pentecostal, and not even just Pentecostal, but charismatic Christian.
Pentecostal charismatic
Yeah,
community.
yeah.
But are
Maybe
there?
let's see
Mhm.
more broadly, because I sort of think that most in the US, I suspect that a lot of evangelicals would say, "Oh, I'm not charismatic," right? But that's
Right.
not true in Haiti. Like in Haiti, if you're converti, nobody's uncomfortable with charismatic styles of worship. At least not, at least not the folks that I interviewed. Nobody's, like
Mhm.
they they they're not caught up in the question of the apostolic era and whether the gifts persist. That's a that's a question that like old preachers when I was growing up
Mhm.
preached about.
Mhm.
My Haitian informants, no question, spiritual gifts are alive and well, so
Yes. But among the people that where you did your field work, right, in three locations in Haiti, if I recall correctly,
yep.
when they talk, when your informants, right, talked about spiritual warfare, what kind are there different types of spiritual warfare?
I mean,
Now we're talking about an idea, right, first,
mm-hmm.
but now can we break it down? I mean, is there a list?
Yeah, yeah. There's a list. There's absolutely a list. Now I don't know how widely distributed that list is, but I've got to share this with you. I'm actually going to email you something after our conversation tonight because you
Okay.
got like it's gonna blow your mind.
Okay.
Two things to say. On the one hand, most of my informants don't use the language of spiritual warfare. They just do the thing, which is to say, at the beginning of a jeûne, when they start singing, right, and they're getting people sort of across the morning, it's kind of a slow burn. They're doing some praying. When things start to get a little more hot in the service, about midday, everybody stands up and they're stomping on the devil. Sometimes they're shooting the devil with, imaginary guns. The congregations that I went to loved to sort of point in the four cardinal directions, and pew pew was the sound. Pew pew, the devil, right? Or stomp on the devil with your feet. Those are some really kind of benign, symbolic gestures towards spiritual warfare. But when things get really hot, the healing practices that take place are understood to be spiritual warfare in the same way that like an exorcism is spiritual warfare. You know what I mean? There are spirits. So the most popular would be Nam. Nam, Nam, Nam. He's got Nam, 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 Nam everywhere, right? But then sometimes baka, or diable racial, or even zombie. And those last two are the particularly difficult ones, according to the prophets and prophetesses. These are really hard to deal with. And so this would sometimes take weeks, you know what I mean, of praying. Sometimes physical harm. You know, we talked earlier about the guy that left because he found himself beating a guy up, you know, who he thought had a demon. Most of the time, not physical harm. Most of the time, just covering people with blankets, praying over people. One time I got caught in the middle of a dance circle and they covered me with a blanket, man, and they started, you know, they were rubbing me down. And I thought, I don't even think I have an affliction. I don't, but I'm here for it. Like these, you know, there's really obvious ways that spiritual warfare takes place. So that's the one thing. But is there a list? Yeah. So I came across a document that two different of the three, two different prophetesses had a copy of the same document. I'm forgetting his name now. Maybe Marcelin Faurice. Some pastor near Gonaive had sort of self-published this thing, and I have a copy of it. I've tried to reach out to him because he's still alive. I found him on WhatsApp, but I don't think he checks WhatsApp, so I haven't made contact. But he wrote a handbook titled Combat Spirituel.
Wow.
And in it, he lists the sort of Catholic feast calendar, and then he tells which Loa and other specters and mauvais esprits accompany the saints and these different times of year. He gives advice for what to do. He talks about what symptoms the different spiritual afflictions may cause. And then most interestingly, and this is actually the topic of an article that I wrote several years ago in the Journal of Haitian Studies. Most interestingly, there's an epilogue at the end where he narrates the Haitian Revolution from the perspective that the Holy Spirit is responsible for the victory, because that's the only thing that he says makes any sense. It can't be, in his words, so these are his words, he said it can't be the blood of a pig that made someone bulletproof. It can't be the blood of a pig that caused, you know, Haitians to be successful against Napoleon's army. Therefore, he says, it was very clearly the Holy Spirit that fought the Haitian Revolution, which is a really fascinating theological take when a lot of Haitian evangelicals are like kind of ambivalent even about the Haitian Revolution. Here's a Pentecostal. Actually, I should say, I think he's a Baptist. I'm not sure that he's Pentecostal.
Wow.
But that's a fascinating way to sort of like own the liberation that took place, you know, in probably what I think remains the most amazing revolution in the history of the world. And he owns it and gives credit to the Holy Spirit.
Wow. I would love to check out that book.
Yeah, you've got to. You've got to.
Now, Lenny, in your article, you also, I guess, you had a conversation with a young man in Port-au-Prince, I believe.
Yes.
And you asked him about the difference between Bokor and Uga, right?
Yeah.
Which, you know, for me, for us, you know, those of us who, you know, work on Vodou, we know in contemporary Vodou scholarship, there's a distinction between Unga and Bokor.
Right.
I would like you to share with our audience, what did the informant say? The distinction, not only what's the relationship between Boko and the Uga? Or what is a Boko, what is a Uga first, you know?
Though in the literature, and this literature is not just English literature, this is also from like folklorists in Haiti, right? The sort of Vodou, apologists and folklorists in Haiti. There is an important distinction between a Boko that's like a sorcerer and an Unga, who's a priest healer. And thinking about this in sort of African-inspired terms, an Unga works with the right hand. He's a healer, right? He participates in like primarily Rada right type stuff. He's interested in healing. He works for free. He's like a leader in his community, wise like Solomon, Maya Deren would tell us. The Boko is a sorcerer. He works with both hands. So he's willing to do whatever you need. And he also, important distinction, works for money. That's the basic distinction in the literature. So I noticed that these Pentecostals and Convertis more generally never talk about Unga. Never, ever, ever. So I said, hey, in essence, where have all the Ungan gone, right? Where are they? Why are they? You never talk about Ungan. And he said, oh, Boko, Ungan, same thing. Same thing. So in my article, in my article, I'm playing dumb a little bit, and I'm like, hey, well, that's not true. They're different. Let me tell you all the ways that they're different. And he's a really sweet guy, and he was sincere with me. He said, maybe, but that's not what I know. And this led me to think, it is a pretty convenient distinction that anthropologists and other people have drawn between, the Unga, who is like a pure piece of benevolent, healing, good African religion with none of this bad, evil, witchcraft, all of the negative associations. And so it led me to thinking through this thing really kind of deeply. And what I claim, I don't want to say discover, what I claim to be true is that we exaggerate that distinction, and that on the ground, much of the time, Boko and Unga are functionally the same. And I actually think that that's more true to the Haitian experience. It's also more true to Vodou on the ground, which is that an Unga may sometimes function as Boko.
There's also a linguistic distinction. It depends where you are in Haiti.
Sure.
For example, in northern Haiti, in the countryside of Cap-Haitian, like Pomago, right, where my family is from, they don't use the term Unga.
Yeah.
They use Boko. If you're talking to a typical person who's from the northern part of Haiti, Pomago, Lembe, they won't even know what you're talking about. Unga.
Right, Unga.
It's Boko, right? So there's a linguistic distinction here.
I think that linguistic distinction is connected also, though, to the anthropological distinction, which is the places that anthropologists were working. You know what I mean? Mirebalais,
yes,
in and around the capital.
Yes,
those are there's a feedback loop there. The anthropologists were trying to sort through, is a Boko the same thing as this guy? Is this different than this? And they're operating with this binary. Folklorists are doing the same thing. And so what I think you have today, because that's all, this is a project that's been underway for almost 100 years. So what I think you have now is, in and around the capital, you have people who would say, no, I am an Unga, right? I am only an Unga. I don't work as Boko. But outside of that area, you have Boko and Mambo. That's it.
But would you say Vodou scholars have constructed a discourse, a Vaudouist discourse that does not reflect the typical experience of Vodou practitioners in Haiti. I don't want to generalize what I say, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to formulate my thought as
Yeah.
I'm talking to you, because we're talking about the difference between Bokor and Nougat for some people, some Haitians, they're the same. There's not a
Yeah.
distinction,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, I mean, to keep myself safe, what I would not say is that it doesn't reflect the experience of Vodou for most Haitians, because I don't know how many.
Right.
I
And
think
Vodou is diverse, very diverse.
right.
Where
I
you
think
are in
that's
Haiti.
Yep.
Yes.
So first of all, what it does show us is that, like, the Vodou that has been constructed now does reflect, what some people know of Vodou, because it's been built for 70, 80 years, right? So for some, that's the way that they understand the thing. But the only thing that we need to add to that discourse is that those people simply need to at least be aware that it has been constructed, right? It's only dangerous when we don't realize that it has been constructed, when we think that it's sort of natural or pure or original. I also think that, yes, definitely in the Northwest, Nounga.
Yeah, I was reading an article by a Vodou scholar, I guess Vodou Christianity scholar. The article is about the evolution of Vodou. What is Vodou? And he did an excellent work by going back to the literature of the 18th century, right? Actually, most likely 19th century.
Okay, so after the revolution.
Yeah, after the revolution, is Vodou a dance?
Right.
Right? So that's the question. Is it a dance? Is it a religion? In the sense that, is it the worship of the snake, Dambala, right?
Right.
So there's actually an evolution in Haitian history. The way Vodou was understood back then, let's say in colonial time, then in post-independent Haiti,
Right.
the new meaning, right, he has acquired. Not only that, now, it's interesting in Haitian literature, Lenny, uh, I was working on an article for a book chapter for a book, right? Uh, what is it called? I forgot. It's a book contract I have with the University of Mississippi Press, right?
Okay.
How Haitian literary scholars have constructed a new discourse about Vodou beginning in the 1920s. It's interesting when you read pre-1920s Haitian literature, poetry. It's really poetry. Haitian poets would refer to the Haitian Revolution as the work of God. When I said God, is the Judeo-Christian God, right? In fact, some of those poems are praise poems, poems attributed to God. In several instances, God is called the God of revolution, of the liberator, right? It's after the 1930s.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Oh, exactly. You see a different discourse a different discourse. It's a constructed discourse about Vodou. Now, there is a sharp distinction what 19th century Haitian creative writers used to write, how they understood the revolution, its meaning, than what those other creative writers in the 1930s.
Yeah.
For example, Karl Bra, right? A famous Haitian poet, a member of the Noirist movement, wrote a series of poems attributing the work of the Haitian Revolution to Ezra Lee. But that discourse did not exist before, prior to the 1930s.
So the question that is popping out of me is what happens between 1915 and 1934 that fundamentally changes the way Haitians understand Vodou as religion, as like
religion.
identity.
Yeah.
And that thing is obviously the U.S. occupation.
Yes.
A bunch of people poking around and saying, oh, zombies, oh, look at this weird religion. And you know what I mean? The othering discourse from outside changes things. It impacts the way Vodou lives in Haitian consciousness.
Yeah, not only that, a new discourse emerged, right? What is Vodou, right? If we go back to the work of Jean-Paul Smith, for example, what is Vodou? Is Vodou a religion? Not only that, Smart wanted to take Vodou to a higher level. Not just Vodou as a religion, but it should be studied academically, just like we study Christianity, Hinduism, Islam.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, the same, we could do the same thing when talking about Hinduism, right? Hinduism doesn't exist as such until after British colonization, right? Because the British are the ones who have a category, religion, right? And so what kind of religion are these diverse people? Well, they're not Muslims. They speak they speak Hindi. Let's call it Hinduism, right? I mean, this has happened, I feel like, all over the world. And what you're pointing to is really interesting because it happens in Haiti after the occupation.
After the occupation. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. I have a last question for you.
Okay.
So where do you see charismatic Pentecostal okay. Let me rephrase my question, right? Let me look at my note, Lenny.
Yeah,
right?
look at your
Let me look at my note.
You're getting sleepy. That's
yes, sir. Where do you see the Pentecostal charismatic community in the Haitian society in terms of growth, let's say in 10 to 15 years from now? The reason I asked you this question, Lenny, because different scholars, for example, in the work of Terry Ray and Alex, I don't remember Alex's last name, they published a book based on their research, ethnographic research among the Haitian people in Miami.
Yeah.
They, if I remember correctly, they estimated Haitian Protestantism, the population of Haitian Protestantism, close to 40, I think 46%. 46%, that's very high. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he sent me the results of a census, right, from the Haitian government That was published in 2003,
Oh, okay.
about 20 years ago.
Okay.
Louis, right? Louis Cornelius.
Mhm.
And Louis and I were reading the numbers together. Okay. It breaks down by, for example, Catholicism is 54.5%
Mhm.
of the Haitian population. Uh, and then Episcopalian, the Baptist, Methodist. Now, when we put all the numbers together, Lenny, the numbers for Haitian Protestantism,
Mm.
it was about 27.6%.
Mhm.
I know it's been 20 years,
Mhm.
but it's not in the 40s.
Mm. I think there's a real problem with trying to discern this sort of thing
Mhm.
from a census. And so
Yes.
in this regard, you're gonna find me leaning towards Terry Ray's take here.
Mhm.
Because of course it's entirely down to what someone is willing to self-identify.
Mhm.
It's also a question of how many regions of Haiti are being represented in a census and how well it's being responded to. And in Haiti, I think those are, in Haiti and currently in Haiti, I think that it's a terrible place to try to do a census, like,
Yes, sir.
so I don't know, but the 40% number wouldn't, to me, like, be shocking
Okay.
if it were true.
Okay.
But to do it, to think in the 40s
Mhm.
would require us to allow a lot of both this and that. And what I mean is, I think that once again, we want people to strongly identify and to be very exclusive in
Mhm.
their religious practices, but people on the ground aren't
Yes.
exclusive.
Mhm.
And so my answer would be this: if Terry's numbers are right, they
Mhm.
are they are right that some of the time 46% of Haitians are
Mhm.
Protestants.
Mhm.
Some of the time.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Right. Right.
Now, your original question was where do I see it going?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think there's any question that it's growing, because we should expect Haiti in that regard to probably follow global trends,
Mhm.
and it's still very much growing right now globally.
Okay.
That particular style of Christianity, and if you actually disregard the distinction between Catholics and Protestants, which is wild, I know, but if you disregard that and you consider charismatic Catholics as part of a growing charismatic Christianity,
Mhm.
then charismatic Christianity is by a long shot the
Mhm.
fastest growing global version of Christianity, by
Mhm.
a long shot.
Okay. Very good. Any last word would you like to say?
I feel like as my host, you should have the last word.
I tell you, Len, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure for me.
For me, you're the not because you're my friend. You're doing some serious work. No, seriously, on not only on Haitian Lame Séles, Haitian Pentecostalism, but the relationship, right? The intimate relationship, and what you call double suspicion, right, with the Vodou religion, you
Mhm.
know, and interesting work. And then you're bold, man. You're bold. Some of the territories you know you've gone in your research.
That's what I am, naive.
Yeah, you're very bold. For example, you're not afraid to tackle to address this controversial issue about Bokor and Ungan, you know, and a published article, right?
Yeah, well, that
Yeah.
shows you though, you know, like there's an audience. They recognize that it's true.
Wow. So Dr. Lenny Lowe is a professor, an assistant professor in the Department of Religious Studies at the College of Charleston in South Carolina. We should talk again, my friend.
We should absolutely talk again. I would be happy to do it.
So what are you working on now?
This is a good question. Right now, what I'm working on is a research proposal because I have a sabbatical on the horizon, and I don't know if you're gonna like this. A little bit of a sidestep, but I mentioned this to you at HSA. There's a Haitian migrant community in Providenciales.
Oh, yes, you did. Yes.
Of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yes.
And so my next little project, which I'm thinking probably in terms of a series of articles, but who knows, right? Is going to investigate Jehovah's Witnesses conversion, the pressures of migration on that conversion. But in keeping with my theological interest, I'm also really interested because Jehovah's Witnesses as a group tend to be sort of more doctrinally rigid. And so what I'm really interested in looking at is the ways that Haitians who are converting, not Haitians who perhaps were part of the movement in Haiti, that's less interesting to me, but Haitians who are converting newly to join the Jehovah's Witness Church, what kinds of theological sort of tensions are popping up for them. So that's where I'm headed next, is to the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Well, and in this article, you're going to put on your theological hat.
Maybe. Maybe I'll put on a bow tie.
Bow tie. Let's go with a bow tie. Well, Lenny, it was such a pleasure talking with you, my friend. Good luck on your...
Thank you so much.
Okay. And get some rest.
Yeah, you too.
I will. Well, you take care. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
We'll talk soon.
We talk soon. Again, guys, this is Dr. Lucien Joseph, Dr. Lou for short, with the Center for Faith, Reason, and Dialogue. We had a great time with Dr. Lenny Lowe, who's an assistant professor of religion at the College of Charleston. Share this video if you like what we're doing, right? Share it with your friends. Go on Facebook. Go on Facebook, our YouTube channel. Give us a like. I hope everybody's doing well. I'll see you next month for another episode.